Hey folks, I'm orta therox, a developer, designer, was currently working on the TypeScript team at Microsoft. I generally work on things like programming languages, developer tools, and I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to compose complicated developer tools and how to describe them. And in this video, we're going to talk about something that's not really a developer tool, but I think it's a tool that developers should use, and that is Signal, the messaging app that's focused on end-to-end encryption. So let's have a look at what that is and how it got built and why it got built. So Signal has always been a bit of an outlier in sort of communication tools. It first started appearing on my personal radar back when I was talking with Frederick Jacobs about CocoaPods. Then when Edward Snowden released the NSA leaks, it switched from being a sort of interesting side project to a sort of niche set of people to sort of critical privacy infrastructure for kind of anybody doing work that may be somewhat critical of large government entities. So Signal is it's a privacy-focused messenger client, which nowadays has all the sort of modern bells and whistles of the rest of the sort of its siblings, but it took a considerably longer time for Signal to get those features. And to understand why, we kind of have to go back a bit through the history of Signal and try and understand how Signal and the Signal protocol sort of co-evolved together, and how the sort of team that was building Signal sort of iterated through different different systems of trying to work on it. So Signal started off with this kind of interesting pattern of a good idea and then working for a large company to get it going, and then coming back out of that company and sort of reiterating on what they've previously done. So Signal started in 2010 with Merle Moxon Spike and Stuart Anderson working together to create a sort of company called Whisper Systems. And this company was based on building enterprise mobile security features. And that included two major products for Android phones. That was Text Secure, which did end-to-end SMS messaging, and Red Phone, which did end-to-end VoIP. So only voice, because this was also a long time ago, and that's when everybody was still just using voices. And it took them about 2 years of working on this project before Twitter acquired Whisper Systems. And the stated goal of that was for basically Moxie and Stuart to work on Twitter's sort of mobile security infrastructure. It's as an outsider, it was very hard to find any sort of useful information about what they actually did at Twitter, but it only took a year before Moxie left Twitter and started up an entirely new sort of not quite company, but not quite non-profit either, and it was called the Open Whisper Systems, and it's a sort of open community that was funded from sort of Bitcoin donations or large foundations who is it now? The Shuttleworth Foundation. And if you want to get a sense of how useful this work was, the NSA internally described Red Phone and a few other tools as being a near total lack of insight to understanding the target's communications and presence. Basically stating, this is internal notes that anybody using Red Phone, they couldn't track. And this sort of work was foundationally important to a large amount of sort of journalists and to anybody promoting democracy in countries where they don't have democracy. And they spent a lot of time only working on Android. And it was the sort of time coming out of Twitter and working on Open Whisper Systems that they started to wonder, well, why don't we merge these two apps together and make it cross-mobile platform, so run on both iOS and on Android, and rebrand this sort of joined tool as Signal. And so this was kind of the first time that Signal actually existed on iOS, and it was actually the first time I started to take notice. Obviously, once there was an iOS app, and at the time I was an iOS developer, actually had a few commits into the code base of Signal. And one of the cool things that they were doing at the time was they had this system called BitHub. And what happened is every time you submitted a commit that was merged into the Signal code base, you actually got paid in Bitcoin to a Coinbase account. So I set up my Coinbase back in 2015 because I submitted a few PRs to Signal, and that ended up being worth thousands, like the peak of Bitcoins. I only did like 2 PRs. Imagine what it would have been like if you were working full time on Signal, getting all these Bitcoins for every commit that you were working on. Man, there is going to be definitely some Signal Bitcoin millionaires because of that system called BitHub. And so once the releases were solid and Signal was available on both iOS and on Android, Moxie actually took some time off working on Signal the app to work with WhatsApp, implementing what was becoming to be called the Signal protocol. And you can see the sort of perception of how he was thinking about this, which was, I have now built this end-to-end encrypted client-server system that's working really well, that is used by like Edward Snowden. And what if we, instead of just having this, the sort of secret source available inside Signal, we actually start taking the tools and the techniques and we start moving it out to other companies. And they went to WhatsApp, or WhatsApp went to them. It was never specified how that worked, but the Open Whisper Systems, basically Moxie, took the time to go to WhatsApp and help them implement end-to-end encryption on every single part of their system. And this was straight after the Facebook acquisition. These improvements were then sort of ported to Facebook Messenger. There's like a private mode that you can go into that effectively uses the Signal protocol. And Google, with its millions of different chat apps, released one called Allo that also had an optional opt-in Signal-based protocol for having private conversations. But who knows where that ended up or where it is now. Maybe that code lives in what's the new one? Meet? Maybe it lives in Meet. Who knows? But this work was kind of wrapped up in 2016, and they came back and started building things like the Electron app that makes it available for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And actually, that's my main interface to using Signal. I don't really use a mobile phone very often, and I don't. And so my desktop is my main communication tool, but my wife uses mobile, and so I use that to talk with her a lot. And it's a little bit like iMessage, where you get the simplified version of the sort of communication tool, but you've got enough to send messages back and forth and send pictures. So, to some extent, that's enough. And so in 2018, Open Whisper Systems, this kind of weird non-profit-ish thing was replaced by the Signal Foundation. And the Signal Foundation is effectively the founder of WhatsApp took his Facebook money and invested $50 million of it into Signal as a concept, making it a real nonprofit, and really turning it into something that can last and can actually employ a lot of people and not just like, a few hacky programmers trying to get stuff done. And the goal was to sort of build like a true end-to-end encrypted, privacy-focused messenger that was kind of not feature complete, but feature to feature had a lot of the same stuff that the rest of the messenger world had. So that could be as simple as read receipts, or read receipts, or being able to send stickers or GIFs inside the app. And it was actually during this time period that I interviewed at Signal and sort of talked with them about how they were seeing all these scaling issues and were trying to build something really massive. And they really wanted to take it from like this sort of niche-ish people that know and care about security to people that just want a good messenger client. And, there's advocates that are like, this is the right one because it also is really secure. And so for me, I thought it was quite a refreshing take on trying to build like a consumer tech tool, but with a really strong security focus that was available for everybody on every platform. That sort of, for me, that's why it's like my secondary, like I try and use iMessage as much as possible, but iMessage is only available on Macs and iOS. And so Signal is always this backup, is this perfect like other tool that I use for everything else. And so why make Signal? Well, to some extent, I think it's better that I leave Moxie to describe it himself. So this clip coming up is from the start of when Open Vista Systems was being built, and he was starting to work on the new Signal protocol, the thing that sort of exploded everywhere.
Open to me means just acting transparently and building your project in a way where other people can participate and use it to or adapt it for their own needs. With my fellowship, I'm working on privacy enhancing technology. We live in a world today with a tremendous amount of surveillance of people like journalists, democracy advocates, and ordinary citizens. What we're doing is trying to develop secure communication tools for mobile devices that will allow people to install an app on their mobile phone and have a phone call with the same level of confidence as if they were whispering into someone's ear, or install an app onto their mobile device and send someone a text message with the same level of confidence of writing a note on a piece of paper and passing it to someone in class. The two apps that we're working on are called Redphone and TextSecure. Redphone is for secure voice calls. TextSecure is for encrypted text messages. And the idea is to, develop things that meet users' expectations and are as frictionless, dead simple, easy to use as possible.
So to echo Moxie's point here, there is definitely a lot of value in having communication tools that allow for private communication, right? It should be an expectation of us as individuals that a message that I send to my wife is kept confidential between the two of us. Societies always have this interesting trade-off between security and privacy, and I feel like technology has got to a point where the tools for building massive surveillance systems are considerably cheaper than they used to be. I think if you watch a movie like The Lives of Others, you kind of get a sense of what it used to be like in order to build a mass surveillance network. It was a lot of people on the ground monitoring, 3 to 5 people. And nowadays, an NSA operative has access to your text messages, your emails, your phone calls from the last year. And that's all available on a really easy to use search engine that they don't even have to ask permission to use. And if you've ever dared to do something as scary as browse a Linux website or, maybe submit code to a Signal chat client, then you're likely on a list or one hop away from somebody who is. And this is genuinely scary times to be living in when, from my perspective, the sort of English democratic governments have sort of stopped conforming to the social contract of we vote you in, we elect, and you help these people, you help us to prosper as a nation. And it feels like sometimes that, these larger government entities don't necessarily perceive the people that vote for them as the people that are on their side. So I feel like using tools like Signal sort of help makes mass surveillance harder to implement, and it normalizes the use of privacy tools, which to me is kind of a moral imperative given the kind of dismal state of the modern centralized internet. So if you're savvy enough to code, you're probably savvy enough to think about the privacy ramifications of your work and the tools that you use on a day-to-day basis. So do you use Signal? If so, maybe leave a comment about why. The NSA will pick that one up. Otherwise, hit the like and subscribe button. I'm sure the NSA will probably also pick that up. And I'll see you next time. Ciao.